A military veteran goes on a murderous rampage, killing 5 police officers. The nation still struggling to comprehend exactly what led up to this tragedy in Dallas. An African-American sniper hunted down white cops as they protected Black Lives Matter protesters rallying against recent police killings of young black men. Now, police across the U.S. are taking new security precautions. How can police and citizens, black and white, come together, learn to trust again, address some of the root causes of this? I want to bring our panel in, CNN law enforcement analyst Cedric Alexander. He's public safety director for DeKalb County, Georgia Police Department. Commentator Mark Lamont Hill, he's author of Nobody, Casualties of America's War on the Vulnerable from Ferguson to Flint and Beyond. Former St. Louis police officer Reddit Hudson, he's co-founder of the National Officers Coalition for Accountability. And our legal analyst Joey Jackson. Cedric, we were speaking about this earlier. In the wake of the Dallas ambush, how do you make officers feel? I guess it's two things. It's safety, but also a sense of not being under assault. I've been getting a lot of messages, text messages, phone calls, Facebook postings from police officers I know, even some in my family, who say they feel under assault. They feel criticized. They feel no one's respecting them for the jobs they do or giving them credit for the jobs they do. So you kind of have two issues to handle, don't you? That kind of sense of lack of satisfaction, but also this sense of genuine fear for their safety.
Well, let me tell you what police officers are saying to you, quite frankly, across the country, saying to all of us. We're human beings too. We have feelings and we have emotions, and they go out and they do the very best job that they can do when they're trained and trained well. And of course, things do happen, mistakes happen, controversy occurs, but these are human beings. And right now, to make our officers across this country feel safe is that the communities in which they serve. I ask that those communities, I ask that those police officers, in spite of what we just saw in Baton Rouge, in spite of what we just saw in Minnesota, those two events are going to be investigated. They're going to be investigated by outside entities, and at some point, some resolve as to what occurred is going to come to some factual light. But in the meantime, in an interim, we have to help take care of our police officers. We got to be supportive of them. What you see happening in Dallas today is a good example of police and community coming together, because there is no public safety without police, and there's no community without police and community working well together. They're partners. So this is a very painful and hurtful time for all of us, but we have to be able to find a way to bridge those broken gaps and continue to move towards trying to advance policing and advance and create that type of integrity that we want between police and community in order to interact.
Listen, I want to get everybody to pipe in. Perhaps Reddit, I'll go to you next. Just to get a police perspective here, because what you have is sort of a loss of trust on both sides. And again, I'm not saying this is across the board, but you hear policemen saying, we feel criticized. We feel that people don't trust us. We feel that they're blaming us unduly for the mistakes of a few. Then you have people on the other side, particularly black Americans, who feel singled out by police. You got a loss of trust on both sides. Where do we begin to address this?
Well, you begin right where you are. You always begin right where you are. This is a tough, complex subject. This divide and this discourse is not new to America. It's been going on for a long time.
No question.
You know, Mark Lamont said something in the last segment that he's very right about. This is just not about 2 or 3 bad apples. This is about a larger systemic problem that exists, but it's all not police alone. It is a criminal justice system that is also challenged and need to be looked at, because even if you look at some of the laws that are written, those laws attach more to certain groups and populations than they do to other. That in and of itself is a systemic issue. And you know who has to be the first responder? I do. Those 1,000 men and women who are out there trying to do a good job. We don't write the law, we enforce it. You got to support your police. We got to support them, and police as well need to support and will support their communities.
Guys, jump in as you go here. Maybe Joey, I'll go to you, just because the issue raised about biases in the criminal justice system.
You know, it's a real problem, and we have to back up a bit. Police are afforded a great deal of discretion, and that's where it begins. Police can make arrests, they can not make arrests, they can go after people who have broken taillights, they can decide to ignore issues with respect to broken taillights, etc. But when you look at it, there has to be not only a coexisting relationship, Jim, between the police and community, it needs to be a relationship that thrives. We need police. We need police out there on the beat to protect us, to serve us, to make us safe. The disconnect occurs when you have communities who believe that there's an over-policing here. There's a lack of sensitivity here. There's a problem here that needs to be addressed. And so on the one hand, yes, we need to educate our youths in terms of dealing with the police, how to act during police encounters, but we also have to educate the community of the police in terms of dealing with those communities, having respect for the communities and making sure that the communities feel that they can trust the police. So it has to be a coexisting relationship. And yes, in terms of the system, there does need to be some systemic change in it, of course. But I think what you have to deal with first is the first line. I mean, the police are the face of it. And if you exercise that discretion in a way that allows people to feel respected and allows people to feel that police are not really targeting them but are working with them, I think you begin to address the problem.
Reddit, Mark, please jump in. Reddit, perhaps you first.
When it goes to repairing the relationship between the police and communities across this country, especially black communities, let me make it as simple as I can for you. It's about accountability. When those 5 officers lost their lives in Dallas, we mourned them. We responded the way that human beings would to the tragedy that we saw unfold in front of us. And the community felt that way when we saw that happen. We need police officers to respond that way when Eric Garner is murdered on the corner, when Alton Sterling is murdered in Baton Rouge, when Philando Castile is shot to death with a 4-year-old child in the back of his car and his fiance next to him while lawfully obeying the commands of the officer. When are we as law enforcement people going to challenge that and mourn those horrific losses as well until we see ourselves as fully and equally human and coming from the same community? We're at a deficit, and this criminal justice system in the United States has operated at a moral deficit for our lifetimes and before. It has to do with institutional racism, which is an uncomfortable topic for us to talk about, but we have to come to grips with it in a changing nation, and we can do it. And I think that for me personally, it starts with me and my colleagues at the National Coalition of Law Enforcement for Justice, Reform, and Accountability, and law enforcement people across the country holding our peers accountable when they abuse the rights, human rights, civil rights, and civil liberties of the people we're sworn to serve.
Mark, I want Mark Lamont Hill. Please jump in.
Yeah, I think, again, it's important, and I agree with everything that was just said. I think it's important, though, to frame the conversation in a way that speaks to the accurate history here. This is not a question of how do we repair the relationship between communities and police, how do we build trust back. The trust was never there, and the trust was never deserved. There's never been a moment in American history where black people have been relieved to see, as collectively speaking, to see the police show up. There's never been a moment where as black men or women, poor, middle class, or rich, that when you see those blue lights behind you getting pulled over, you don't have anxiety.
But has it been getting better? You heard the president say this is not the 60s. Is it your view that it's as bad as it always has been?
I think that can become a straw man. My argument isn't that the 60s are identical to the 2016s. My argument, though, is that the role that police play in our communities hasn't changed. The sense of terror that people feel in our communities hasn't shifted. Of course, this isn't the 1960s, but that doesn't change the fact that police still serve a role as occupying forces in our community. As Cedric said, there's still disparate law on the books that is directly linked to race. There's also a different application of the law that's directly related to race when it comes to these. So, as Joey said, when it's related to things like broken taillights or other forms of policing, the system itself is broken. The laws themselves are not fair. The system itself is unjust, and it's not just the police, because again, the police are just the one piece of this. The entire system is broken, whether it's the bail system, whether it's the public defender system. We were going down the list. None of it works.
Guys, I hate to interrupt this, but it is a continuing conversation both this afternoon and in the coming days and weeks. Cedric, Mark, Reddit, Joey, thanks very much. We're going to keep this up. We got to keep it up as a country. Straight ahead, Philando Castile's death at the hands of a police officer was one of the week's tragic events, just one of them.